Welcome back to another Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from the Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
And we are coming to you from the AMP.
That's what they call it. We're in the media room where they do the post-game press conferences, but currently it's halftime of a game, so we're able to sneak in here where it's probably quieter than anywhere else in this building currently.
Yeah, Kansas versus Arkansas is going on right now, but Purdue, more importantly, beat High Point 75-63 earlier today, advances to the second round of the NCAA tournament. It was looked like it was going to be a comfortable win at times. High Point got it down to 3 points and had the ball at the free throw line in the second half. Misses the front end of a 1-on-1. That was as close as they got. Purdue took care of it from there. And I thought, to me, and I don't know which one we want to start with, but they're kind of interconnected. The two big stories today were the bench play and offensive rebounding, which was spearheaded by guys coming off the bench.
Absolutely. In the moments, I didn't realize Jakari Harris had the impact that he did on the boards, but he's somebody who's really in recent weeks been impressing me with just by playing hard, which is a Purdue moniker that, it's easy to say that. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to go out and do it, but I thought he was a big spark. Obviously, people will remember the back-to-back dunks from Colvin and Heide that were both offensive rebound putbacks. That's really what sparked the end of the first half run, I thought, and kind of set the tone for the energy that Purdue had and really played with for pretty much all 40 minutes tonight.
I mean, three big plays there at the end of the first half. Those two dunks, and then was it a lob? Was it a missed shot? Whatever the Braden Smith had, and Will Berg scores on that. So 3 baskets off the bench during I think it was a 12-4 run at the end of the first half, which doesn't sound huge, but it pushed the lead out to 10 at halftime. And we've seen Purdue in a few instances this year not win those final minutes of the first half, and it costs them either at the end of the game or at least just makes the second half more of a bear than it needed to be. And that was something that they kind of had to protect against. And Traycoff and Wren is on the bench for a long part of that stretch. He had 2 fouls, and Matt Painter's trying to manage that and have him for as much of the second half as he could. And it meant a lot of minutes for Will Berg, who you looked up 30 minutes over 23 games. The previous 23 games coming into this,
I think he did the Auburn game in December,
and I think he didn't play in like 12 of them.
Yeah.
So either he doesn't get in at all, or he's in for seconds sometimes. And tonight had to play one of his longest stretches of the season, and I thought you could argue this was his best game for Purdue, like his career.
And yesterday I had talked to him a little bit in the locker room, mostly because we didn't have a lot of players in there at that time, but I was like, hey, it's interesting that he's come in the first half, the last 2 games, and if Trey gets in foul trouble, he's going to be important in this game against High Point. And I said something about the opportunity. He said, he didn't expect to play this game. And, I asked him after the game if he thought he would get into this, and he just said no, and that was the end of the response. So the fact that he got in there, played 8 minutes, and told me yesterday, if I get an opportunity, I'm ready for it. He went out and proved it. He had 4 points in 8 minutes in the first half, had 2 rebounds. And then that play at the end of the first half, I really thought the reason Purdue called a timeout there was to get Trey Kaufman-Wren back on the floor. And then after the game, we learned Matt Painter didn't even want to risk potential foul trying to get an offensive board or whatever it might be. So he just left Wilberg out there, and thankfully for Purdue he did, because you get a lift going to the locker room on what I guess was a shot by Braden Smith that turned into 2 points for Wilberg, and kind of highlighted just the unsung heroes that Purdue, if it is going to make another run through this tournament, is going to need.
Yeah, and frankly, where did Trey Kaufman-Wren get his second foul today? On an offensive rebound attempt. And if you're Matt Painter, I think the risk-reward concept you're having there, you're up by 8 points. You've still got Braden Smith and the ball in his hands with 22 seconds left or whatever. I guess I understand why he would leave him there. And Wilberg stepped up and made a play. What we haven't yet got to the person who, in my player ratings that I filed there right at the buzzer, was the guy that I gave the star to as the guy of the game. And Camden Heide has turned in some really good performances here down the stretch. I'm thinking of the UCLA game. He was, he was pretty key in. Again, from an offensive rebounding standpoint, kind of spearheaded what they did in the second half on the offensive glass in that game. And today, first career double-double, 11 points, 10 rebounds, and I think 4 of those were on offense. And the first 3, the last one they didn't do anything with, but those first 3 all seemed to really come at pretty critical times or led to big baskets.
Yeah, and I misposted because I, in my head, had thought that Cam Heide had a double-double against USC in the Big Ten tournament. He only had 9 points and 11 boards, I think, that night. So pretty close. But either way, that's twice in the last 3 games. Well, he's really been very good on the glass, an area where Purdue is going to need some help, quite frankly. And after that USC game, I think I tweeted Trey Kaufman-Renn has 29 points or whatever it was, but Cam Heide was the MVP of this game. And I feel very much, like you said, the same way today because the way he came out and rebounded led to him starting the second half and just playing pretty much the entire second half and being a big lift. It wasn't just the 3 that he hit early. It was more the rebounding, the defense, just what he gives you from an athletic standpoint that Purdue can really rely on against a team like High Point. Now, does that translate to Saturday? We don't know, but it certainly was something that you can look at having options based on matchups.
I guess we should mention real quick, not everybody here in Providence avoided the upset bug. McNeese State was up 31-13 on Clemson at halftime. Clemson comes all the way back, the 5 seed, and makes it tough at the end. But McNeese State, coached by Will Wade, former LSU coach, is going to be who Purdue plays on Saturday. They won that game 69-67. We'll probably talk to you guys a little bit more about that after we have interviews here in Providence again on Friday, talking to both teams. But the Camden Heide and the offensive rebounding, this has been – well, let's talk about him, I guess, more specifically first, because I thought, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, that if this team is ahead of schedule, because everybody ever since last season, it's been like, well, next year they could be pretty good, but 2 years they could be really good, right? Because you'll have 4th-year stars, 5th year, I guess, in Trey Kaufman-Renn's case. You'll have all these guys right now who are role players will be a year older, assuming you get this whole nucleus back. Like everybody's kind of pinpointed next year as the one that would be the really big year. But sometimes teams are ahead of schedule, and the way that I think a team like Purdue gets ahead of schedule is when guys like Camden Heide, Miles Colvin, Jakari Harris, you could throw Will Berg into that, but it's mostly more of those role player guys start playing their best basketball ever. I think Camden Heide is playing his best basketball that he's played in college right now. I know he's had some bigger scoring games. He had 18 points against Rutgers or whatever it was. He had some decent games early in the NCAA tournament last year, but right now I think he's more consistently playing basketball at a high level, and it raises the floor for what this team is, whatever group of 5 they have on the floor.
Yeah, and I think I've probably mentioned it on this podcast before, but I talked to PJ Thompson about Camden Heide when he was going through midseason struggles, couldn't hit a shot to save his life, and PJ said at the time, I'm not worried about it. Cam Heide will come through when we need him to come through, and sure enough, here 2 times in the last 3 games, he's been probably the reason that Purdue was able to get over the hump and win those games. So, I don't know if it's some sort of forward thinking or whatever, but you are getting the best production out of some of these guys. And I think, there's still a game at least this season. If you're Purdue, you hope more than that. But just the progress that's been made from TJ Cox, from Jakari Harris, they're going to be really, really good. And by the time they become, what you would think would be starters as juniors, they're going to have 2 years of being role players under Fletcher Loyer and Braden Smith that should lend itself to seamlessly transition. But right now, I think those are guys who can help you get to the Sweet 16 here on Saturday.
I'm sure right now there's some discussion going on as to, Cam Heide started the second half. Should he be in the starting lineup again? Purdue did try that at one point this year. They decided they weren't getting, ironically, everything they needed from a rebounding and defensive standpoint. And I think what it does right now for Matt Painter is who starts this game is, I'm not going to say it's not important, but it's not as important as who he figures out from the matchups that develop during a game and the vibe that develops during a game. Who needs to be on the floor. Camden Heide had a good first half, but the other thing that they noticed was the way that he called it cross-matching, what High Point was doing with Caleb First.
They're putting the center on Caleb First, which caused some mismatches that Heide could exploit because they wouldn't do that with him in the game.
Right. And that was the reason and they didn't do that when Cam Heide was in there, and it changed the dynamic. And as you just said. So that was why he stayed on the floor for pretty much the entire second half, if not the entire. Did he come out in the second half? If he did, it was very brief. So it's what we talked about at the beginning of the year kind of coming to fruition, that we thought that this team's identity would be its versatility, that it wouldn't necessarily be this locked-in 5 starters. And even though they have changed the starting lineup, it's only been a couple of iterations of this starting lineup. They've used the same one now for going back to since January, right? Like
January 2nd.
Yeah. And Camden Heide was the one who came out of the starting lineup to make that happen. But I think what you're seeing now is the guys they have on the floor at the end of the game quite often is Camden Heide, it's Jakari Harris, and I don't think it's necessarily costing them at the start of these games. Maybe, but at the end of the games, the guys who need to be out there and are making the plays are executing.
And two guys you didn't mention who are the two that were inserted in the lineup, C.J. Cox and Caleb First. I thought they did some good things early on. C.J. Cox had 2 offensive rebounds. The guy's 6'1", 6'2", not a very big guy, but he crashes the glass well and gets some offensive rebounds in key situations. And then Caleb First, even though he only played 9 minutes, he did have a putback early when Purdue was trying to kind of climb back in. It was, High Point had hit a couple early threes and had early momentum. But I thought on the defensive end, he got matched up on a guard on the perimeter twice. And one time he just locked the guy up and caused a shot clock violation. Another time he caused an errant pass that led to a turnover. So those guys did good things in maybe not as big of a role, but still as starters that were out there early that helped Purdue, when the early stages of this game kind of get out and running.
That offensive rebound he got led to the first 2 because he got a putback on it. The first 2 of 20 second chance points that Purdue scored today, and this has been a theme here late in the season. Starting, I think you can go back to the halftime of the UCLA game. UCLA beat them something like it might have been 9-0 on the boards on second chance points in the first half of that game,
right.
And it was only like a 5-point Purdue lead going into halftime. Purdue outscored them. I want to say it was like 14-2 in the second half. Against Rutgers the next game, Rutgers is up, I think, 9-2 on them on second chance points. Purdue outscores them, I think it was 16-0 on offensive second chance points. I'm going to have a piece on IndyStar.com on Friday morning that lays all this out, and I think has the actual numbers that I'm not remembering now. But a lot of second chance points against USC in the Big Ten tournament, a game where they gave up a lot of second chance points, but because they equalized that, then it was what allowed some of their other advantages to lead to that 5-point win. And you're seeing a team that we thought, if you had asked us in December, like what's going to be the thing that knocks this team out of the NCAA tournament eventually or ends their season, however, you would have said, well, defensive rebounding is a good culprit potentially because they allow a lot of offensive rebounding points, and it's not something they necessarily get back in strength. But now they are. They've started to use offensive rebounding as a weapon. The second chance points are now kind of a weapon, and I think nothing really changed schematically. They're not even crashing the boards harder than they were before. I think part of it is just more Jakari Harris said it was something that Paul Lusk, assistant coach, had said. Basically, they're like, hey, if these other teams are going to get offensive rebounding points against us, we have to go get some from them. Like, we need to equalize that. And Camden and Heide said something along the same lines. It's like, we see other teams crashing the boards. Like, why can't we just do that? Like, it was more just like a will to start making that be an asset.
Yeah, and that's actually a thing Will Berg said too. So it's probably they're just, hearing what the coaches are saying and relaying it from a player's perspective. But it's definitely an area that looked much improved today. Now, Purdue should be able to rebound well against High Point. Can you continue to do that? I really was thinking Clemson was a bad matchup for Purdue. Now you don't have to worry about that. So,
sorry, not to cut you off, but McNeese State is, I think, even after this game, they out rebounded Clemson in this game. They won. They had like 43 rebounds and beat them on the boards by 7 or 8, I think. But for the season, they're not a good defensive rebounding team. They rank like 260th something in defensive rebound percentage, but they are like a top 40 offensive rebounding percentage team. And the only 2 teams Purdue has played this year that have a higher offensive rebounding percentage are Texas A&M. No, 3 teams: Texas A&M, Illinois, and Michigan State, which were 3 teams that they knew had they made a big deal about how trying to beat them on the offensive boards or to limit them on the offensive boards was going to be key to winning. So this is another opponent kind of like that. Probably not kind of like them in a lot of other facets. I'm not saying they have athletes like that all over the court, but it's a really good coach, a proven coach who knows how to win. And that is one thing that they do very well. And I think it means that Purdue has to either limit that or come back and get these offensive rebounding points again, continue this recent trend into the next game.
And make no mistake, Trey Cochran, Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith are going to carry this team. But if you're going to get the contributions from the other 6 guys or, 7 guys, if you throw Riley Burgess in there, like you get today, Purdue's going to be pretty dangerous, I think. Be a tough out. I'm not saying that Purdue's going to go back to the Final Four, but it's definitely going to be a team that's, McNeese, and then down the road, maybe a Houston or whoever It's not going to be an easy matchup for anybody, and that's something that Trey Kaufman-Renn had said to me a couple weeks ago. Is like, whoever we play, we are going to be a tough matchup for, because once we get out of the Big Ten and face teams that haven't seen us, we're kind of unique in the way we can do some different things with the pick and roll and things of that sort. But now you're adding in just the ability to have a Cam Heide, who's was a 3-and-D guy last year, who's now playing the 4 and doing a pretty good job. Things like that. I think that there's potential here for Purdue to do something. Now, granted, it could all just go downhill, as we've seen it do here late in the season in some of these games. But I think that today was a very promising sign going into the second round of the NCAA tournament.
Well, the other thing, though, that I think that like you say, like the stars are at the end of the day going to have to make the difference against the best teams that you play, probably going forward. And maybe that starts as early as Saturday. Today, Trey Kaufman-Renn had, 21 points, but he only played 29 minutes. And so he's very productive when he's out there, which has been the case pretty much all season. But maybe those 5 minutes that he didn't get to play that he normally would, maybe they make a difference if you're playing another, one of the best teams in the country. Braden Smith, this is now going on like 4 games where he's not shooting very well. Like the shots aren't falling for him. I don't think, there isn't a lot of complaint about from the coaching staff and the people I talk to about the decisions he's making right now. Some shots that have been falling for him aren't falling right now. In fact, the one thing that Matt Painter did bring up was on that play at the end of the first half. He needed to take the fadeaway, right? Or the pull up, instead of going in and doing what he did. He thought that was actually the higher percentage shot for him to take because he's Braden Smith and he makes that shot. So Matt Painter is still kind of harping on him to shoot it more. So those guys didn't have a huge game, but that's why the bench was so important. And I think that I'm starting to see this reminded me a little bit of, in 2018-19, Carson Edwards wasn't as good as Braden Smith all season. But, there was a stretch where he was really struggling to shoot the ball, and then all of a sudden it locked in at the right time in the NCAA tournament. And we all know that Braden Smith could potentially lock into that at any given time. But if he continues to shoot 30%, it also makes Purdue more susceptible.
Yeah, and that's something that Matt Painter actually harped on quite a bit last year, because people remember Carson Edwards as this incredible player that I think that his junior year was just this great season all along. And Matt Painter was like, no. He was shooting like 30% going into the NCAA tournament that year. And then he just went bonkers and could not miss a shot for 2 weeks. So Purdue keeps saying there's a lot of makes coming our way. Trey Kaufman even said there's a lot of makes coming our way, and I'm excited for that and what we're going to look like when that happens. I don't know if that's realistic, but Purdue's telling itself that and believes it. But I do think that Purdue's a better shooting team than it has shown today, and then it showed against Michigan in its most recent outing. And if it rights itself a little bit, that will be a very good thing. And unless you're Purdue's opponent that day.
Yeah, I'll take credit for this, by the way. There was a point today where I tweeted out that Smith was 4 of 16 today, and that meant over the last 4 games he was shooting like 31.7% from the field, and he immediately made a layup and a 3. So you're welcome. I tweeted that into existence.
I tweeted after he made that 3, which was a huge shot. I think it put Purdue up 6.
Yeah.
That feels like in an NCAA tournament a reason to celebrate or whatever, and he almost looked like he was relieved more than anything when it went in.
Yeah. Fletcher Lawyer today, McNeese State was not letting him shoot. I mean, that it seemed like a focus of theirs was to keep the ball out of his hands and not let him get those open looks. He was only 1 of 4 from the field. And I think what was great about that for him was he led Purdue in box plus minus at plus 16. And actually the next highest was 12, I think. So for him to come out and have to be on the floor for that productive of stretches, and he played 32, 33 minutes, right? To be that productive. I mean, he drew 5 fouls today, which was 1 less than Smith and Kaufman-Renn. But considering how much less he has the ball in his hands than them, that tells you what he knows how to do when he does have the ball in his hands. When he isn't getting those open shots, he's able to go create opportunities at the free throw line. He goes 6 of 6 there. I tried to ask him hey, so the thing you're wearing, any on screens, on rebounding, defense, is it any? And he's like, he won't even he's dismissing it completely. He's not that hurt. I saw the bruise. It's kind of like this greenish, blue looking thing. Not fun, but he's playing through that. He's got the sleeve and the pad.
He doesn't want to talk about but basically that's what I got out of yesterday's open locker room period.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get a lot of discussion from him on that as long as the season is going. So it's going at least one more game. Purdue plays McNeese State on Saturday. We don't have a time for that as we're speaking to you right now, but check your local listings, check anystar.com and jconline.com. We'll have that information up along with a lot of other stuff coming out of Friday's interviews and then going into Saturday's game. So for Sam King, thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.